Hi, I'm Kiwi Kana, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be looking at some TikTok art tutorials, art hacks, that sort of thing. There's a lot of great advice on TikTok for artists. I think the internet has been so helpful for learning to make art, and it's really lowered that barrier of entry. But it also means that there's a lot of bad advice out there too, so figuring out what you should be listening to or what you shouldn't be can be kind of a challenge. And I want to offer some of my advice from my perspective on what I think works and doesn't. Let me preface this by saying that I'm coming from my own experiences talking about what works for me, so if there's a process that you really enjoy or something that works super well for you and I don't like it so much, just ignore me and keep doing what you're doing. I'll also have all of the TikTok creators that I mentioned tagged in the description. So if you want to check them out, make sure to do that, and let's just get into it.
Secret to dry your OC in 1 second instead of 5 hours is to have pre-made brushes ready. For example, in this video, I'm using some eyes pre-made brushes I did to help artists to save time.
Okay, what I'm about to say is probably going to sound a little controversial because a lot of the people in the comments of this TikTok were not happy, and don't get me wrong, I understand why, but I think we have to be a little mindful of what these assets are used for. I'm assuming a lot of people aren't going to be using them for illustrations. They're going to be using them in comic work, where you really do have to be looking for all of these shortcuts because you have limited time. That's why in a lot of comics you'll see those 3D model backgrounds. It just takes too much time for what people are being given to make these projects to draw everything by hand. Now, that being said, I also understand people's complaints here, having everything be a stamp. It's not necessarily going to look perfect or even like your own style. So if you're looking for shortcuts when making comic panels, let me tell you what I've seen a lot of professionals do. Instead of making brushes or stamps, they compile all of the drawings they've done of their characters, so they pull every head angle that they have, every piece of clothing, every hand pose, every hair angle, everything. And they put it all into one big spreadsheet so that you can see everything all at once. Then you clean all of that up and make it really consistent. And then you can use that as a reference. So you can just copy paste from the drawings that you've already drawn to make sure that style remains the same, but you're still able to speed up your work a little bit, borrowing eyes from this one head angle and putting it into a new panel. Obviously, you're going to be changing things up and painting over it. That's going to be really crucial here. As for backgrounds, I don't think there's anything wrong with using 3D models, but I do think it's really helpful to take the time to paint over it or do the line art over it yourself so that it matches your style. But yeah, if you're just doing illustration, I don't think you need these stamps or brushes. I think drawing things by hand is going to help you improve a lot faster. There's nothing wrong with using them as a reference, but I wouldn't rely on them too heavily. Okay, so now we're looking at this hack where you use an airbrush to color in this saturated blue color over the face, and in the center of that you airbrush in this red color, and then you set that to an overlay and lower the opacity a little bit. I'm sure you've seen this one before, which is why I wanted to talk about it, but can someone please explain to me what the point of this is? I really don't get it. I'm assuming it's supposed to mimic where the blood pools in the face. It's going to be red in the center of your cheeks and your nose where there's more blood, but again, why not just add a little bit of blush and be more intentional with that placement? I think it's probably sort of similar to the rules when you're doing makeup. Like, for example, if you're doing your contour, you don't just smear it all over your cheek and then blend it out and blur it out really big, right? You intentionally put it in very specific places and use a little brush to sort of blend it up super specifically, so you're only touching the places you actually want to touch with that color. And I sort of think the same thing applies here. I don't know, maybe it's just going over my head. If you know why this works or if you really like doing it, let me know. I just think this one's not for me.
Oh, are you bad at color theory? Well, I'm not. You should use digital underpainting. Okay, so get a sketch or line art or whatever, then make a new layer underneath it and turn off the background, and then select the entire thing and fill it with like the color you want to use. And then use a fun textured brush with like darker colors that complement the main color and just go at it, go insane, and just select the colors from the reference picture. Turn the opacity down until you can see the underpainting, and look at her. She's so perfect. I use 10 billion different layer modes to render and shade. Wow, you did it. That's so great. Bye.
Okay, yeah, this is a 10 out of 10 tip for me. I think this is a really really great suggestion. Underpainting is something that artists have been doing for centuries. You'll see it all the time in traditional oil paintings, things like that. They usually underpaint with an orange. I see a lot of that, but you can pretty much use any color you want for underpainting. And it just ensures that those colors are shining through, and it adds this sense of depth and light to your piece. And it also unifies the palette, so everything is tied together with these unifying colors, and it's going to help everything look a lot more cohesive. I love to see traditional art processes being used digitally, because there is really no reason we shouldn't be using these techniques that have been working for artists for so many years. So yeah, definitely give this a try. I actually do this a lot in my work, so finally a really good hack.
Texture is mark making. You don't need all those fancy texture brushes, trust me. You don't need a leaf brush to paint leaves, you don't need a rock brush to paint rocks, you don't need a cloud brush to paint clouds. Digital sand brushes, while convenient at times, have had the unintended effect of shaping and restricting the way we see and operate as artists. Instead, I like to think of texture as mark making, as traditional painters and inkers would, using a limited brush set in creative ways to depict textural qualities with mark making. I can depict stringy bark with directional brushstrokes according to the vertical grain. Broken up highlights and shadows on the edges of paved bricks helps to communicate the roughness of the brick texture. A field of grass can be depicted with short directional strokes in the highlights and shadows. Try not to be so literal with your brushes. Do more with less.
Yeah, this is another really excellent video, and I completely agree with everything this creator is saying. I've talked about this on my channel before, that one of the biggest mistakes I made as a beginner artist was relying too heavily on custom brushes. If you want to watch the rest of that video to find out the other big mistakes that I made as a beginner artist, I'll also have that video linked in my description. But regardless, relying too much on custom brushes makes it a lot harder, at least in my experience, to really think like an artist. Instead of looking at whatever object you're wanting to paint and then simplifying it and translating it into your own style, and really figuring out creative solutions to capture it, you're just stamping down a brush that looks like the shape of grass, for example. And I don't want to make it sound like there's anything wrong with that, or that you can't get good results from using these brushes, but I do think it can make it a lot harder to improve early on. So if you can avoid using them, I definitely recommend it. I honestly have really mixed feelings about this one, because I don't think it's terrible advice, but honestly, I think that these are just two different methods for drawing anatomy. When you're focusing more on boxes or using actual shapes, that's going to be more useful for breaking down the form and for worrying about perspective. Whereas if you're focusing more on this sort of continuous line and flow, that's more of a gesture drawing, and both of them serve their own purposes, right? So I'm going to give you an example that I'm sketching on my own, one where I'm focusing more on gesture and one where I'm really breaking everything down geometrically. Now, the one thing I will say about this is that not every single body part is a rectangle, so that can sometimes lead to this sort of stiffness, which I think is what this creator is alluding to. That's the problem here, is that drawing with these boxes feels really stiff. Instead, I would probably use cylinders and these bean-shaped cylinders for the ribcage and the pelvis. You can see what I'm talking about here, but this sort of drawing is really going to help you capture the form because you're drawing through all of these shapes. Again, when it comes to gesture drawings, these drawings do have a lot more flow and a greater sense of energy. That said, it's also not as solid when it comes to perspective or form. So it really just depends on what you're going for, and I think that both of these kinds of drawings are things that you should be incorporating into your study sessions.
This is how I cheat at digital arts with a method no one knows. Being a traditional artist for over 10 years, when I first tried digital art, everything was rough. The slippery glass texture and uncomfortable digital pen made me forget all of my fundamentals. I was so demotivated that I actually cried until I discovered this crazy magical sketchbook. Everything you sketch in this book is synced instantly to your phone or tablet. Yeah, look, this is crazy. It uses real papers, which feels more fluid and authentic for traditional artists like us. Look how I whipped out a full doodle drawing in 10 minutes. And the craziest part is you can transform the sketchbook into a drawing tablet. Simply pull out the papers, fold it up, place the tablet cover on top, switch the pen nib, and connect it to your computer. Now I transfer my sketch draft to my computer and do the coloring and details. It's a fantastic way for traditional artists to transition into digital art.
Okay, last one for this video. I really don't like sounding negative or being too disparaging online, but to be honest, I really don't see the point in something like this. Obviously, if using a product like this is something that works for you, that's great, but I feel like there are better options. If you're worried about how slippery the glass feels, there are paper textured screen protectors that are really great. If you just like sketching on paper, that's also perfectly fine. You can just take a picture of that, scan it into whatever program you're using, and then use those tools already built into these drawing programs to extract the line art. You don't need a new fancy device to do it for you. It also seems like here, you can kind of see that the drawing looks a little squished when transferred over to your phone. I don't know if that's just the angle of the phone here, but if that were me and I was drawing, I would find that really frustrating. I want things to look exactly how I want them to look. So if it's getting distorted in any way, that would be a bit of a deal breaker for me. I think it's really important to look for when somebody is offering a genuine solution or when they're just trying to sell you something. Not that every product being sold to you is bad or wouldn't work for you, but just really ask yourself if there are easier or cheaper solutions to whatever problems you might be having, or if you really, really need what this person is offering. I hope you enjoyed this video and the little elf warm-up drawing I did in the background. Let me know if you want me to make another one reviewing art hacks, and feel free to tag me on Instagram or TikTok if you run across any videos that you'd like for me to react to. I post new videos every Monday at 3 p.m. EST, so if you like my content, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.